Good morning, everyone. So today is Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. And this is basically the second webinar for the Zero Emission Vehicle Awareness Initiative funded by NRCan. And today, hopefully, I will try to stick under 20 minutes looking into the planning process and the planning guidelines for zero electric vehicles. So let's start with the research team. So acknowledging the effort of Sadia, Petra, Anastasia, and myself. The next webinar series will be delivered by Anastasia, which I will highlight at the end of our presentation. So this is part of the Zero Emission Vehicle Awareness Initiative led by Natural Resources Canada. And we were lucky to receive support from NRCan, and the views, opinion, and all the statement expressed in this presentation represent the research team, and they don't represent NRCan. So let's go quickly into the agenda for this webinar. So basically, this is two-level exercise. The first one into looking into high-level planning decision, things that you should do and things that you should avoid when you are planning for zero electric vehicle implementation in transit. And then we will go into detailed guideline step-by-step around 16 different action items that you need to follow when you are planning the implementation of zero electric vehicle in transit. And this is applicable to all technologies, not only specific for electric buses. So when you receive the email from Petra, you will see this link to the webinar and report and the presentation as well. So the report and presentation will be available in the email. So when we look into a high-level planning approach for any problem, not only zero electric vehicle application in transit, you can approach it two different ways. You can go bottom-up approach or you can go top-down approach. We argue that a top-down approach is more appropriate because at the end of the day, our goal is to go into a network optimization, a full network electrification. And when I say electrification, inclusive of all technologies, so a full network electrification. So when our aim is a full network, we need to start our planning decision taking the network into consideration. A lot of practices taking place in Canada and North America that people will start bottom-up approach looking into route assessment. Route assessment is as good as a single route, and it will not give you a full perspective of the entire operation for three fundamental reasons. All municipalities rotate buses across routes. So if you optimize your battery capacity, for example, over one specific route, you are limiting the operational flexibility. Around 72% of municipalities in Canada, they do interlining operation. So you cannot optimize a single route without considering the run and cut diagram for the entire fleet. So now your interest is the asset, which is the vehicle, not the actual route. Three route characteristics will have significant variation in terms of daily operation. So over day, over season, over year, as well as length, ridership, and occupancy. So in order to design for each specific route, you are actually considering only these characteristics and ignoring anything outside of this range. So if you follow a bottom-up approach and you start optimizing your route, you are either misallocating resources, either over-allocating or under-allocating. You're hurting your interlining algorithm, run and cut. So AKA you're not optimizing your vehicle utilization. You're hurting your maintenance schedule and bus rotation because now buses will collect different kilometers every day and they will be tied to each route. And eventually you will end up having dedicated infrastructure for each route. And this will not enable sharing infrastructure between different routes. Therefore, we argue that a top-down approach, and we prove this numerically and from a cost perspective, emission, as well as fleet size and number of charging infrastructure, that you focus on the fleet and network, you don't focus on the route. Route is a byproduct of the fleet. You focus on shared infrastructure sizing allocation, and then look into the rollout and operation. So a top-down approach is recommended. And if you are just starting zero electric vehicle implementation in transit, it's very good that you do this exercise at the two different scopes, a high level and detailed guideline. High level will give you a very good approach to narrow down your problem, and then you move into a full detailed guideline. So stage one, fleet network planning, stage two, infrastructure planning, and then you look into your operation. So for each stage, we develop the so-called do and don't recommendations when you are planning, when you are considering the problem. So the first one, feasibility analysis. So many municipalities are actually contracting private sector to look into feasibility analysis. So please, if you're at this stage, ask them to do a network feasibility, not route feasibility. You need to understand the feasibility of your network to operate a specific set of technologies. It shouldn't be fixed to one technology, could entertain multiple technologies at the same time, but look at the network level, not the route level. When you are going into electric buses specifically, please consider winter energy consumption values when you are doing the feasibility, not summer, because winter is more like the bus will consume more energy, and you need to make sure that your bus is feasible for operation during the winter. One item that most consultants will not take into consideration, which is actually the battery fading or battery capacity degradation model. Are you owning what's your ownership or the lifespan of your bus in the fleet? Is it 12 years, 6 years, 18 years? Accordingly, you need to estimate the fading, and you need to understand what's the replacement cycle of the battery, and if the replacement cycle will hit like half, similar to the diesel bus, we do midlife refurbish. So if you are replacing in 6 years, or are you replacing in 3 years? This is critical because every battery size will have a different fading model. So as the battery capacity increases, the fading or the loss of capacity is not as steep as a smaller battery. So your phone battery will lose capacity pretty quickly compared to a larger battery. The same in buses. A 150 kilowatt hour battery, their fading will be faster than a 550 kilowatt hour battery, considering they have the same charging cycles and the same depth of a charge. So the second item, when you consider battery fading, you need to consider, are you allowed to lease? Are you going for leasing or owning the asset? Some municipalities in Canada are allowed to lease the battery, not owning the battery, and then the lease contract will guarantee that the battery capacity will remain within 85% of its original capacity, and therefore you can actually design your network accordingly. If you are owning the asset, meaning you're not allowed to lease the battery, you need to consider the fading throughout the lifetime or the lifespan of your vehicle. So estimate the required battery size based on the degree of operational flexibility. Two different approaches available. You go either heterogeneous battery capacity or homogeneous battery capacity. These are the extreme ends. Homogeneous battery capacity will allow you to rotate buses across the entire network. Heterogeneous will actually stick the bus to a specific route. You can go in between. What's the operation flexibility? So you will cluster routes with the same features and run the interlining for these routes together, and then other routes together. So you need to be aware of this exercise before doing the feasibility analysis. The last one is related to the spatiotemporal assessment of energy demand. So it's not route energy score, as I see in the recent reports published by consultants here in Canada and in the States. It's the spatiotemporal energy demand. What's the energy demand over time and space? Where is the location of the energy demand and at what time? Because this will inform you about the capacity of your charging station and the location of the charging station. So it's energy demand over time at start, end, terminal, and depot stops. Because you don't want to understand what's the energy demand and at intermediate stops that you don't have opportunity to charge. So the only places, if you're running electric buses, to charge your bus will be start, stop, end stop, terminal or hubs, and at the bus bar. So you need to understand the energy demand at each location throughout the entire day per bus, and then aggregate it to get the entire network. Similarly, if you're running fuels, to understand this, but it will give you a better, a larger range, but you need to understand this at terminal and depot or at the hydrogen facility. So depending on your technology of choice, this shouldn't be estimated per route. This should be estimated for the entire fleet. Because if you have two buses arriving at the same terminal, each one of them demanding a specific amount of energy, the total demand at this point, at this unit of time, must be assessed, not assessed individually. This list will give you the don't. So basically, it's the opposite of the do list. So there are things to consider when you are planning your fleet. Are you using homogeneous batteries or buses or not? This is a question you need to address at the beginning because this will impact the entire process. Are you focusing only on depot charging or considering both of them? Because again, the feasibility will change completely. Are you operating fixed route network or interline operation? Again, the feasibility will change significantly. So if you are unsure about both of them, request that all like the external or the extreme ends of the problem will be assessed for you, or when you are doing, if you are doing this in-house, that you are assessing the entire range of the problem when you are doing the fleet or network feasibility planning. The second one is infrastructure planning. And again, using the same notion of top-down approach, when you optimize the charging location and their size, it should be charged for the network, not for route. So a single charger can charge multiple buses operating across different routes. So there is no logic of optimizing the charging station per route. When you assess the charging schedule, you need to assess this for the entire fleet, considering the operation of the entire fleet. And this is a byproduct of the spatiotemporal assessment of energy demand. Again, at the same time, because infrastructure is critical, especially with utility upgrade and utility impact, you need to understand or assess what's the energy demand over time from the grid for the entire fleet, because this will tell you if the utility grid have enough capacity to feed your operation if you're running electric bus, if the hydrogen production available to feed your fuel cell bus if you're running fuel cell bus, or if you're running an RNG bus. Speak with utility provider, and the term utility here is inclusive of any energy provider. It's not only electric. So this is very important because this will give you a quick understanding on the amount of infrastructure upgrades required just to meet your energy demand. We are not speaking about special allocation of chargers. We are not speaking about special allocation of fueling station or anything. It's just energy demand. Do we have enough energy to satisfy our operation or not? Again, there are multiple parameters that you need to consider. If you are running electric bus, you need to understand what will be the number of pulleys for each charging station if you are planning the charging station. So the charging station will give you the total power, but the total power might be distributed across multiple buses. So you need to understand if two buses are arriving at the same charging station at the same time, and this could be derived from the charging schedule for the entire fleet. So you're focusing on fleet. Homogeneous or heterogeneous charger in terms of power. Some people will say homogeneous is good because the spare part and maintenance and contracting, it will be extremely easy. However, heterogeneous proved to be more financially appealing because you will give exactly, or you will assign the rated power exactly what you need. Fueling and charging location and route versus depot. This again coming at the fleet or the network planning, and again here in the infrastructure. This is extremely important. The way you're paying your utility bill is a time of use tariffs or peak demand. So like, what's your objective here? Taming the peak or avoiding on peak time of use? If you identify this, it will actually apply so many constraints on the optimization problem that we will mention in the latter stage. But you need to be aware of this at the beginning, because this will give you, if you need energy storage system for electricity or hydrogen fueling tank or whatever energy storage that you need in place to actually avoid extending or increasing your operational bill, because you are either charging during on peak time or you're hitting a very high peak during your operation. For the operational planning, especially when it comes into electric bus, please use gas heater. I know the notion is go zero emission. There is nothing called zero emission because the production phase and the recycling phase of the battery will still get some emission. So gas heater will save you a lot of energy consumption, especially in winter. Rotate your bus to harmonize battery fading if you're running electric bus. We modeled six cities in Canada, and we see some buses will require battery replacement in year 3, and some buses will require battery replacement in year 8, operating on the same fleet if we don't rotate the buses. Train drivers for eco driving. Every new technology will require specific driving behavior. Driver aggressiveness have significant impact on the energy consumption rate, the way you accelerate, decelerate. So part of the capacity building internally is the driver training. Electricity time of use and energy storage system, and optimize the charging schedule. Both of them are tied to each other, two sides of the same coin. Charging, again, refer to charging and refueling. Battery capacity fading, scatter the charging station risk distribution. This is extremely important. We just finished an exercise looking into the impact of electricity outage on electric bus operation. We modeled this as hourly outage or half a day outage or 1 day outage. And concentrating charging station to one location means that you're putting all your eggs in one basket, aka your system is extremely vulnerable, and any disruption to this location will lead to significant cascading impact over the service operation. So risk-wise and risk distribution, you need to especially scatter the charging station. Consider failure rates for charging equipment. Every charging equipment, their manual will have their failure rate. So you need to consider failure rate and the probability of this failure and reverse it to get the spare ratio of your charging equipment or fueling equipment. For electric buses, please consider en-route and depot charging. None of them could be the ultimate winner. Maybe only in hub and spoke networks, small municipalities, charging might do, but again, charging will be prone to a high risk of disruption. Enable multiple pulleys for each charging station. Similar to the nozzle, you go to the gas station, you will have multiple nozzles for your gas station. So this is briefly the high level planning. So detailed guidelines, again, I will be more than happy to come and visit, do this in person or over Zoom or like any online platform. We modeled, as I mentioned, 6 Canadian cities, and we actually integrated how you can apply all these detailed guidelines from open source data, import GTFS, import AVL, APC, and CAN elevation weather network, and then have our model feeding of these data set, and will give you a unique estimation for your specific transit agency. So in a nutshell, this is the detailed one. So the first one will give you, coming from the high level implementation guidelines, this is the one that we just discussed. The detailed one focuses on 5 main domains: system level planning, operational planning, financial planning, capacity assessment, environmental assessment, and then together they will feed into the business plan. So as you can see, some of these tasks are concurrent. They must be addressed together. There is no sequential, and some of them are sequential in nature. So concurrent and sequential is extremely important that you plan this out, because some items are like literally byproduct of other parameters. Energy demand is byproduct of the battery size you put on your bus, is byproduct of the AVL or the speed profile and the occupancy ratio. So you need to do all of them together, not sequentially. You don't select your battery and then estimate the energy consumption. What's the best battery that serves this specific energy, so speed profile, and this occupancy level, and this route characteristics, and so on and so forth. So let's start with the first one. Again, these should be done together. So you need to, at the very first stage, you need to estimate the energy demand per route per operation time. So I know I said that we need to do this for the entire network, go top-down approach. However, when we go detailed guideline, we will start route and then we will aggregate to network and then break it down again route. So we will go this route twice. So energy demand per route will vary over the operation day. Early morning, morning peak, midday, afternoon peak, and late night. So you have 5 different operation periods. So when you estimate your energy demand per route, please estimate them for each operation time and for each season. So you have the 4 seasons. So then you will need to code your operation scheme into a binary code, looking into what's the availability of each bus to receive energy, to refuel or charge or whatever. So this binary code, it's a very simple code that you will do 0 and 1. 1 if the bus is not engaged in operation and available to charge or refuel. 0 if the bus is engaged in operation. So you will do this for every bus. Now we are speaking about bus, not route. And then you can actually extract the avenue to learn, sorry, not avenue to learn, the AVL, automatic vehicle location data, and based on its 1 minute interval. So based on 1 minute interval, you can actually recode this data immediately. Then you will identify the so-called transit network structure. There is hub and spoke, multi-hub, double tree, random network, whatever your network type. Big metropolitan cities like Toronto will have the so-called random network. Medium city like Hamilton will have multi-hub. Smaller city will have a hub and spoke, just one central location. Why you need to identify network structure? Because this will tell you about potential location that multiple buses are coming together at certain times of the day. So this will give you a potential candidate for energy refueling and charging station. Then after you identify these locations, you'll go into existing capability and expansion capacity. And this will focus on 2 components. The locations that you identified, do you have land? What's the ownership of the land over there? Do you have enough space to do a renovation or upgrades or to install energy storage system or charging station? And the second one is related to the bus bar. What's your lifting equipment capability? What's the utility capability? What's the refueling capability? Because this will tell you what kind of technology might better be integrated with the existing infrastructure, or it will give you indication about what's the required infrastructure upgrade to implement a specific technology. So the technology choice shouldn't be out of the blue. I like e-bus is better. You need also to consider infrastructure assessment, which one is more logical to be selected based on the available infrastructure. So this exercise should be done together so that all of them impact each other. So when you are doing this, this stage is just preparing our transit network to be analyzed. At the same time, and this is unique to electric, you need to understand the so-called behind the meter analysis. What's the suitability of the utility infrastructure for each of the candidate location in terms of transformer, wiring, local substation, and so on and so forth. Similar to hydrogen, what's the availability of energy, if there is enough fueling location or you can install a fueling infrastructure at this location or not. And then utility profile, what's the utility generation capacity per time? Typically, we do this every 15 minutes for every hour. So it's 24 multiplied by 4. Understanding the so-called the energy generation valley. And then let's say this is basically the energy consumption in my city. So there is some gaps between the generation and the consumption. This is in its simplest form. So this is basically the cap of generation. So if I'm operating an electric bus and I expect that I will demand this amount of energy per unit of time, it means that I don't even have enough generation in my utility grid to provide me with the energy required. So therefore, it's really good and important to assess the generation capacity for each 15 minutes in our network. So overall, this first stage will give you holistic system level planning for eBus, but again, for any technology. So basically, it will serve as a planning stage. The second one is the detailed one. So the detailed one that we must have 1 hertz or 1 second energy simulation model. You cannot survive with high level energy simulation model. Why? Because especially for electric bus, the more accurate speed profile you have, the better energy consumption model you will get. Similar to internal combustion engine, but the sensitivity of the internal combustion engine and fuel cell is not as severe as electric buses. So please consider getting your route data measured for the speed profile of your data. AVL will give you 1 minute location of the bus. There is a device, a high precision GPS device, $400 you can buy mounted on the bus, and this will give you a very accurate 1 hertz speed profile, which could be used in the energy simulation. And then you need to consider the router characteristics and how they impact your energy consumption. Again, like I specifically wrote electric bus here. However, this is applied to all other technologies as well, but not as severe as electric bus. So router characteristics in order. Elevation will be the highest one. So you need to get your elevation point at least every 100 or 200 meters. You can extract this from CAN elevation open source data. The second one, number of stops, it's called the stop density. So number of stops per kilometers, number of right turn and left turn, because left turn is completely different from right turn. Traffic condition is captured through our 1 hertz speed profile. So the second one will be acceleration and deceleration rate, which will give you indication on the driver aggressiveness when they accelerate and decelerate. So you need to consider these characteristics. So 2 of them are highly related to the route, stop density and the right and turn movement of the bus. And then you need to assess the so-called transit system resiliency. And this is a unique stream of analysis and research on its own, because you need to assess a reliability of your operation in 2 different phases. Pre-implementation, do we have even technology to serve our route? Assuming you have a bus on a 10-minute headway operating for 23 hours a day, and the route is roughly 120 kilometers. No way there is an electric bus that can operate this route. So this is the pre-implementation reliability. Post-implementation, what if a charging station is down for 15 minutes? What will happen? What's the probability of service? What's the maintenance cycle for electric bus, and how this will impact my spare ratio for my operation? Again, even within the detailed guidelines, the statements are too generic, but because this must go case by case when we actually model our network. So when you go into the life cycle cost model, there are plenty of trade-offs that we figured when we are doing the optimization exercise. So fleet size and battery capacity and the charger power, these 3 elements are tied to each other. So if you increase the charging capacity and have DC charger, most likely you can run on lower battery and have the same number of buses, and vice versa. However, battery fading will be significantly quick, because you're charging your bus multiple times a day, and the depth of a charge and the charging cycle is the main contributor for battery fading. So you cannot solve one and hold the other 2 parameter fixed. You need to consider all of them together in your optimization. What's the cost for operator? What's the cost for electricity or fuel? What's the maintenance cost, infrastructure cost, battery costs, and depreciation and degradation? Because when you're selling your battery that currently is not meeting your operation requirement, you will gain profit. What's the rollout plan in terms of 12 years, 18 years, or whatever? What's your technology choice and fleet size? This is a multi-objective optimization problem. It's called multi-objective stochastic optimization problem, that you need to consider uncertainty in operation, uncertainty in energy consumption, uncertainty in weather condition, and consider these competing objectives together to arrive at the final network. So it's not an easy, straightforward exercise, and you cannot generalize your finding because of competing resources. You can actually model this specifically. For the environmental assessment, the Canadian model is the GH Genius and the Greenhouse GH Plus. These are the two approved model. And in order to satisfy the policy need of city councils, or when you are reporting your greenhouse gas emission saving, highly recommend that you subtract from diesel. This will show greenhouse gas emission reduction in negative, and the cap and trade have already a specific cost for unit greenhouse gas emissions, so you can actually report this in dollar sign. However, what we recently discovered that greenhouse gas emission reduction should also be measured as per passenger kilometer travel based on the occupancy of the bus. So the magic number that if you have 15 passengers on an electric bus, you are actually better than having a single occupancy electric vehicle. So bus with 12 passengers, electric bus with 12 passengers, an EV with 1 passenger, the bus will win. So a bus with 12 passengers versus a ride share electric vehicle, the bus will win. However, this is tied to the number of passengers on board. So another way to report your greenhouse gas emission contribution or savings is to report per passenger, because this is tied to the actual occupancy of your service, aka you can the rollout plan could be informed by the magnitude of potential greenhouse gas emission that you will save based on the occupancy of each bus. After we assess the greenhouse gas emission, we optimize our network. Before we implement, we need to subject our network to the so-called disruptive events. So how the system can manage errors, disruption, or unexpected events during implementation and during operation. So reliability is based on the probability of the system to function, and we can actually get this if we model our optimization as a stochastic optimization or uncertain optimization. If you model your optimization problem as exact solution, it will not consider the probability or the reliability of the operation. While for the robustness, you have two different approaches. One, that you subject your network to a disruptive event and measure the magnitude of impact and then re-optimize, or you actually embed a robustness criteria. We call it the N- criteria in the optimization. So let's say that you would like to make sure that your fleet will operate 100%, even if you have two charging stations down. So when you design your charging station, you must satisfy N-2 criteria, which is actually number of charging station -2, still leading to 100% operation. The second one is actually looking into risk assessment, especially related to the guinea pig syndrome. Some of the zero emission technologies are not well tested, or let's say zero emission vehicle technologies are not at the same progression sphere. Some of them are very mature, some of them are less mature. So there is a high and low risk associated with each technology choice. So please consider this one. There is also potential changes in the cost of human resources, union agreement and union negotiation, especially for maintenance and mechanics when it comes into high voltage regulation with electric bus. So when you look into the business plan, you should consider two elements. What's the short term? What's the most logical to do right now that will better optimize the network performance after I reach my aim of 100% or 80% or 50% transition? So the infrastructure upgrades, rollout strategy, and the fleet procurement must satisfy the longer long-term project, and then the short-term decision will be a byproduct of this. So short-term decisions are actually derived from the long-term vision based on the rollout time horizon that you have in your network. So if we follow the flow chart, so you will estimate energy demand, operation scheme, network structure, infrastructure. together, they will give you information about that will feed into the energy simulation. And at the same time, you will have the behind meter utility profile or energy profile. After you do the energy simulation, you will have route feasibility as the first assessment. What types of technology could serve this specific route? And you internally, you'll have preference toward a specific technology or a specific set of technologies. After you select your technology, you need to look into system resiliency. What's the robustness and reliability and risk assessment for this specific technology or for each technology that you have selected? Then you will go into system optimization, multi-objective stochastic optimization, looking into the spatial temporal elements of your entire operation. And this will give you what's the life cycle cost of your operation over the 12 or 18 years. And it will also inform you on the procurement and rollout strategy based on the number of years you design in the optimization program. Once you decide on the rollout, you look into the skill development because you need to start looking into capacity building, dealing about how the run and cut diagram will be developed based on the unique feature of each technology. At the same time, the life cycle cost model, you can flip it on the other side, and this will give you the greenhouse gas emission. So when you look into the greenhouse gas emission, this will be a very important element to submit to the city. Skill development will tell you external cost that require to build internal capacity, either through consultants or hiring or whatever, and also renegotiating with the union or negotiating with the union agreement. Reliability and robustness will give you risk assessment over operation. So together, these will give you the business plan. And given the time span that you have and the overall objective of your network, again, this will give you the detailed implementation guideline. A disclaimer here that I would like to share with all of you. Throughout our exercise, we model networks for fun, by the way. We don't model network for fees. But what we figured, you cannot compare, you can transfer the approach, but you cannot transfer the results across networks. So I modeled Hamilton, Belleville, Guelph recently, Stratford, what else? Like 2 other cities, and Metro Transit in Austin and Texas. And each one of them due their specific timetable, a specific operation, a specific interlining algorithm will return different set of results. So you should ask yourself if you would like to maintain the same approach that you are applying when you are operating your diesel or CNG buses, or you need to redesign the network considering the limits of the technology. And if you choose the latter, you need to understand that during the 12 years or 10 years of implementation, you will have a mix of technologies, and this need to be integrated in the best possible way, because at the end of the day, we are in the business of delivering trips. We are not in the business of selecting technologies. So I always live by this notion. Riding the bus is great. Riding a zero emission bus is even greater, but the key idea is try the bus. So don't sacrifice your ridership for the sake of technology enhancement. A second reminder about simultaneous versus sequential or concurrent versus sequential. Sometimes this will hurt you a lot because they are interdependent. You need to consider all of them when you are optimizing your network. So if you go to a consultation and it will give you stages like, okay, let's optimize route 1, and then let's optimize route 2, and then let's optimize the network, please say, no, I completely disagree with you. I need a network-based multi-objective optimization. I don't need route-specific, because route is a byproduct of the network. On this note, I'd like to thank you again, and especially thank all the transit agency who agreed to participate in the interview. We already finalized the analysis. It was like literally roughly around 1 million plus words that we analyzed through the interviews, and Anesthesia will actually deliver the 3rd webinar, hopefully in a couple of weeks, giving you the perspective of transit provider for zero electric vehicle implementation, and what are the missing links to move forward. And we hope to share this with policy makers across all three levels of government, and maybe spark some discussion about the needs for transit providers. Thank you. And I, again, a gentle reminder, I'm more than happy to meet with any specific transit agency who would like to do this exercise for their own network. This is a link for the full report, and this is our lovely campus at McMaster. So greeting from Hamilton, and hopefully see you in Knowledge Series